I am pretty much convinced that this can help, some of you, hopefully, right? Because this can always translate into learning opportunities for all. But ultimately, what I really like with your platform is that you are inviting for a dialogue. And not just probably recently, I got to understand the importance of verbalizing, these thoughts around diversity. And it's really a help for you, but it's also a help for me, because the more we think about it, the more we talk about diversity, the more we write about it, the more then we become aware about it. And then the more we can act on it and we surf, on that wave. So the reason why I'm here is to really enjoy this conversation and drive awareness and drive engagement.
Talking about driving, Imran has stopped his driving and parked his car to join us on the panel. Why have you joined us this panel, Imran?
That was a very slick segue. I like your
I told
segue.
you I'm good. I told you I'm good at this.
I did not doubt it at all. Well, look, for me, also very similar to the reasons Jamila gave. I was not familiar with FEMYSO at all until probably, 24 hours ago, literally. And I very quickly looked at your website and what you stand for, and I was very impressed. I was very, very impressed in terms of the outreach you're making, the kind of initiatives you drive, and so on. And similar to Jamila, when I started my career, there was very little access to this kind of organization, really structured thought, access to leaders in industry, but also peers that we could, share ideas with and say, look, we're actually in it together. We're going through similar challenges. We have the same questions, and how can we help each other? And I think one thing I've observed myself, and also other diverse colleagues within the same organization and in different organizations, is that there is a lot of appetite to pay it forward, as it's now called, right? To kind of reach out and not to have our colleagues now, our community, to have the same challenges. As far as we can help to address the challenges we faced by having the conversation, by having the dialogue, and helping in any way we can, I think this is a very positive thing. And whatever little I can add to that debate and that discussion, I'd like to do so. And I also want to kind of learn from you and others, right? What are the current challenges? I don't want to come with my own perceptions and the solutions that maybe were right 20 years ago or 25 years ago when I started my career, but to evolve the thinking to what may be appropriate to our audience and our community and our broad, diverse colleagues and the energy that they represent. So I also feel that to some extent it's a learning exercise for me and to adapt my thinking. But I think it's, as Jamila said, it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue. I don't mean to preach to anyone today, but anything I say that's helpful, then I think this would be a positive thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are here to learn from each other and share and bring this together forward. The topic of today is diversity in the workplace. And we always, perceive words differently from a different perspective, hence our diversity of thoughts. So my question to follow up, Imran, with you is, what does diversity mean to you?
Diversity, for me is something that, for sure is relevant in the workplace, but it's also relevant in so many other contexts. And for me, it kind of really means looking up, looking around me and seeing the diversity that we see in society also reflected in all the environments that I'm in. And, let's be honest, right? Our careers, our professional lives take up a large part of our lives, probably too much, compared to community and sometimes even family. So to be in a workplace and only to have a kind of homogeneous environment of it doesn't matter which community, but only one community, or I would also say not just race and ethnicity, but also cognitively, right? Different thinking styles. I don't think like Jamila. Jamila doesn't think like me, but when I work with her, the power of that diversity comes through because we think differently and we bring different perspectives. And in a similar way, we often talk about right brain, left brain, in terms of cognitive. We have ethnic diversity, we have all forms of diversity. And so for me, what I've learned is that I can often be my best, my teams can often be their best when there is this diversity around us. And I don't want to be in a bubble. I don't want to be in a kind of uniform, homogeneous bubble. So for me, that's primarily what diversity means for me. And I guess, and I know you also, the way you see it is also to think about inclusivity. So often it's very easy, especially when I work in London. London is a very, very diverse place, very diverse. And we only need to open up our doors and, hey, lots of diversity flies into the office, flies into the workplace. But we also need to create inclusive environments. And 10 years ago, it was all about diversity. Now, a lot of my challenge, a lot of our thought is about, once we have the diversity, how are we treating each other, right? Are we creating inclusive environments where people can, and colleagues can be themselves? Because without that, they will very quickly leave, right? So diversity on its own is not really actually an end in itself. So for me, it's about looking up and seeing that diversity. It's about creativity. It's about talent. I have to say 25 years ago, if you said talent, people's minds would be, well, it's a white male colleague. That's what talent meant, right? Now I think everyone recognizes that talent comes in so many different forms. And if you have such a homogeneous culture, you are not really tapping into the talent, the creativity, the energy that is out there. And I personally don't want to be in such a, let's say, stagnant environment. Yeah, it becomes very monotonous, very, very, very similar. You get groupthink, right? And you don't create the best solution. So for me, it's a combination of all of those things.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Imran. Reminds me of a quote I read somewhere. I think it was, diversity is inviting me to the party, and including is asking me to join the dance. And then there was a next step, dance like nobody's watching, to actually give that very good environment that enables one person to act. But it's not really this. I'll move on to Jamila. What does diversity mean to you?
Yes, no, indeed, I like your quote, right? The third one is when you feel you're belonging to something bigger than you, right?
Yes.
This is when you're dancing like no tomorrow. Yeah, but so to answer your question, diversity means so many different things, right? And it means because it touches us differently, right? Because every one of us is so unique. We are all seeing, smelling, thinking, feeling things so differently, because every one of us is a combination of so many different, set of characteristics or experiences or events we've gone through or talents, as we've been talking. So when I think diversity, I'd like first to bring this to myself. I would like to understand, okay, how can I myself describe my diversity? And I will explain you why this was important in my journey. So when I think of Jamila, I think, oh, yeah, I'm a woman, I'm a Muslim, I'm an Arab, I'm a French, I'm a daughter, I am a wife, I am a mom. So all of these characteristics and key roles are really defining who I am, not only at home, but also in the workplace, right? They are defining my behaviors, they are defining my feelings. And those are very important. So when we talk about diversity, and because I know the audience is students, right? Is young people who are starting, I would really invite you to verbalize, to describe, to demystify, your diversity. Because I also believe what it means to me acceptance of myself, right? And as I do this effort of understanding who I am, I will also make sure that I develop this love for who I am, right? And if I want to also be a good person with others and love others, I need to start by loving myself, right? I need to be in this position to love myself. And I can only love myself if I know what is my richness, what is my uniqueness, right? So, so discovering this uniqueness is important. But then what do I do with that, right? Now I discovered what I am, what I stand for, what is unique about me. And I can also get to be curious about everybody else around me and understand their uniqueness too. But then what do I do with this? How do I leverage those differences, every day, be it at work with colleagues, be it at home, with relatives, with friends, or in the communities in general. So really, really, ultimately, we need to think about how we're transforming these into a strength and a value add for everybody. And that goes back to what Imran said, right? It's this notion of inclusion. This is so important. As you explained, Imran, diversity is the first step. It is important, but this is just not enough, right? And I like to share with you actually two analogies I use at home. So hopefully you won't be laughing too much. But I use this formula, 1 + 1 = 3. And you know, my 9-year-old daughter think I suck in math because I can't even count 1 + 1. But okay, I promise one day I will explain her why 1 + 1 = 3. Because really think of it, when you're able to celebrate everyone's difference, this is really when you start unlocking the full potential of the individual. And when you bring this together, then the value you get out of it is much greater than the sum of the individual parts. Okay, so the 1 + 1 = 3 actually is often explained at home, but one day hopefully it will be really understood. And the second analogy that I like to give, I love cooking at home. And my second analogy is about recipes. You know, to do a great meal, you need to have great quality ingredients, right? Fresh and so on, okay? But it's not enough, okay? Because if you don't orchestrate properly the whole recipe, then you still get a mess at the end. You don't get the right, you know, meal, the right tasty meal. And that's the analogy with the talents, right? You can have great talents to start with, but if you're not enabling them, empowering them, then the result out of it can be actually lower than the individual, the sum of the individual parts. So this is why diversity is important, the quality of the talents, right? And then what do you do with those? How do you create this environment, this equal environment where everybody can be their full self, where everybody can feel empowered and can dance like no tomorrow? Right? So these are like the two analogies that I like to give you today. And I will also then say, really close by saying that unfortunately, this inclusion piece is the one where we still have a lot of work to do, be it from the employee side or be it from companies overall, right? So this is something that is often underestimated. And for you all young students, I would say as you look for jobs, as you look for companies that you aspire to work for, one advice is try to understand better about the culture of the company, the purpose, the value, the principle in that company, okay? Because this is important. This is what will help you create this feeling of belonging to something bigger than just you. So yeah, a long speech to say what diversity means to me, but this is such an important topic.
Excellent. I love the cooking example because I'm a fan of cooking myself, and I always focus on orchestrating the ingredients very well. But it's true that we don't think in the same way enough when it comes to people in corporations and organizations and so on. And this is something we need to make a conscious effort to do it. And I also like the fact that you said about understanding oneself. We had in one of the presentations about looking in our experience of the soft skills that we developed and use them to leverage it interviews and to get jobs and so on. And for sure, diversity in oneself can be something that one understands to leverage and to add values to companies. Speaking of companies and businesses, we have this perspective, business is very, profit-driven, state of finance and so on. But we're seeing this trend of diversity being brought up topics in businesses as well. So Jamila, I can continue with you. Why diversity is important for business?
Yes, well, first, diversity is, let's start by saying that this is a moral imperative, right? And any good corporate citizen should ensure that they have a diverse representation, that they can represent the communities they live in, right? And represent the world, right? That is important and not to be underestimated. But second, as well, you also hear like the cliche that diversity programs drive business results. But let me tell you that I think it's not a cliche, because it does really drive business results, right? And it's really, really, and I think as we're moving, with this world, I think it will even be more important as we move ahead. So this tells you that it is also a business imperative because it drives results. How does it drive results? Well, think of a diverse company. What you've mentioned it earlier. You have diversity of thoughts, right? You have a diversity of representation of consumers, customers, suppliers, colleagues, managers. So you are able to better understand the other, right? And by being able to understand the other, you are really saving time. You're really taking a bit more risks. You are innovating differently, right? So ultimately what you're doing is you're creating a competitive advantage for your company, right? And you're solving problems in ways that you could not do before if you're all having the same thinking process, right? So you're richer. and you're better. So this is why really diversity is more than a moral imperative. It's a business imperative, and it is a business strategy. Okay, and the smart companies have all understood that, and this is why they are embedding that in their business strategies. Okay, so, and I'd like to also say, because we're talking here within the workplace, so within the walls of a company, but for the same reason, we also need to look at diversity outside of the walls of a company, right? We know this is good business internally, but for the same rationale, we need to apply that to external world, right? So, and by the way, I met Imran is in this program of supplier diversity. So we are partnering together on helping in Europe first and then beyond, helping companies understand the importance, the business case for diversity in the supply chain. And I like to call out something that is very close to my heart, because when you bring diversity in the workplace, you're also enabling a redistribution of wealth, right, to the different communities. Well, what we can also do that on a B2B side, because then what you're doing with supply diversity programs is you are encouraging, you're enabling, you're opening the doors to companies that are represented, that are staffed by, what we call underrepresented groups, minorities, and so on. Okay, so this is very, very important to sort of level the playing field for the communities that are underrepresented. Sorry, but I also would like to share that diversity feels nice, gives business results, but hey, come also with a lot of challenges. Because think about it. When you recruit people, you want to recruit people that looks like you, because they think like you, because they share the same belief like you. So it's much more easier to trust people who are like you, okay? When you bring this diversity in the workplace, what happens? Building trust becomes such a very difficult thing to do. So the consequence of it is obviously decision-making process is longer, a lot more complication as to solve conflicts, to partner in a team and so on. So it comes with challenges, but of course there are ways, to overcome those challenges. And this way is creating, is for a company to be intentional, creating this culture, creating these welcoming and safe environment for everyone to be themselves, no making assumptions about anyone, right? But the dialogue, the conversation, the team spirit. I mean, there are multiple tools that company know how to use to drive this, ultimately this inclusion, to overcome the challenges of diversity.
I mute myself. Thank you very much, Jamila, for this amazing contribution. Imran, as a management consultant, you deal with a lot of companies, you deal with a lot of boards as well. How is the perception there of the importance of diversity in business?
Yeah, I think again, when I kind of reflect back and reflect where we are today, I certainly echo what Jamila was saying. There is no need any longer, quite frankly, to make the case for diversity. Diversity is absolutely a given in business, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because all the ways that Jamila just expressed, it makes absolute business sense, right? We talk about having a business case or a business logic, right? And organizations may not be perfect, and they may not have got everything right, but they absolutely get that diversity is critical. Now, in a business like Kearney, we have about 3,000 people globally, and it's a knowledge business. We don't have factories, we don't have products. We just have what we can, think in terms of solutions for our clients, and that means that there is, and we are in a market for talent, in a market for thoughts and ideas, and a market for bringing those individuals who have those thoughts and ideas into our firm versus into another firm, right? And if we're only looking for that talent in one particular package, in one form, whether it's male or white or whatever, or even if it's, in a particular ethnic diversity, just like, Indian or African, we are not going to have the diversity of thought that allows us to create the right solutions that organizations, whether it's, P&G or whether it's Cisco or whether it's Amazon, would then feel that we are bringing to them the best ideas and so on. And it's been, there is still research. There is a lot of research always happening to even convince those who are not yet convinced that diversity is critical. So you may have seen recently a report from Harvard Business Review that showed that banks that have more female directors on their boards have fewer cases of fraud than banks that have less female members on their board. And they actually worked out that that was worth something like $8 million a year in fines, regulatory fines, because of committing of fraud. Yeah. And so, we've seen similar research in other areas. And Jamila is absolutely right. There is a learning curve in terms of how you create an inclusive environment, how you tap into all that diversity. But once you manage to do that, you get better solutions, you get faster solutions, you get solutions that really are much more impactful, for our clients and then onwards for their business. And when you get that wrong, it can be really horrible. I mean, I talked about the fines, but you also get, sometimes there can be funny stories, but they are actually quite serious, right? So recently, Louis Vuitton, they made a sweater, some sort of a sweatshirt, and they had a team that came up with the colors. It was called Jamaica. The sweatshirt was called Jamaican sweatshirt or something like this. And instead of the colors being yellow, green, and red, yellow, green, and black, they made it yellow, green, and red. And this was all over the newspapers, and everyone was laughing at Louis Vuitton. Now you can imagine they have no diversity. There's very little diversity in that organization, right? And similar in marketing, if you're creating marketing campaigns that are relevant for all your customers, as opposed to a tiny segment, you need diversity. You need diversity of thought. So for me, and as someone who's traveled all around the world, and I like what Jamila said earlier, and many of you probably heard of this expression of intersectionality, that we are all in some ways, if we talk about male, then Ibrahim, in many corporate settings, we would be the majority, right? And if I think of my faith and I go work in the Middle East, well, I'm in the majority there too, right? So I'm not always in the minority. I'm often in the majority. So we all find ourselves in very different situations, very different contexts, and so we have to kind of reflect on that diversity, but also really challenge ourselves around the inclusivity and make that investment. Maybe just leave you with one final thought on this. At Kearney, we have this expression, essential rightness, and it was something our founder, Tom Kearney, came up with in the 1920s. And what he meant by essential rightness is it's not enough to come up with the right solution. You also have to be able to convince someone else that it's the right answer, it's the right solution for them. Now, unless we have diversity of thought, diversity of ability to influence people from all different cultures, all different backgrounds, because our clients are no longer all white males, right? White Christian males. They are from all kinds of backgrounds. We cannot convince them if we are not thinking like them. If we're not, I had one client who said to me, "Do not come to pitch to me with a white male team. Do not come. If you're going to come, don't even bother. You will not win the work. You will not win the work." So, that's just to kind of give you a sense of the importance, certainly in our industry and clearly for P&G and others, of diversity. And really, I want the audience to know that, there is no need to make the case anymore. The diversity that we represent is absolutely necessary to business, absolutely critical. We are necessary, right? To the future challenges of sustainability, the environment, supplier diversity, social reform, we are critical, right? So, let's push hard and let's get there, because otherwise the problems we have today and in the future will not be solved without diversity.
Excellent. So we talked about, this being diversity being the stepping stone to the next step, which would be inclusion, and, extracting the potential out of the diversity. Jamila, how do we see inclusion as a game changer? And maybe you can share with us some personal inclusion experiences.
Mm-hmm. Well, indeed. Well, as we've been talking about it, right? inclusion is a game changer because it helps transform this diversity into a strength, right? And ultimately into a competitive advantage. So I like to think about inclusion as, the cement within the workplace that brings everyone together and help you get something super solid, super strong, like a strong foundation, right? And why it's a game changer, because once you have like the right orchestration for all ingredients, right, then it means for you that you can bring your unique self at work, right? You're not spending too much energy to hide yourself or to hide aspects of yourself or things that are not visible about yourself, right? And also it sort of gives you the freedom not to conform with the majority that Imran was talking about. You can be different. You have the right to be different. And those companies that are smart about it are celebrating when you are different. And they tell you and they let you know that they are appreciating this difference, right? And they are using it for the benefit of all. So that is the game changing. It's not an easy one, but that is game changing, right? And again, I have a lot of examples where I was damn scared when I started to really be, myself. First of all, I don't think even I knew who I was, right? Really, really. Yes, of course, I think I knew, but it's really through the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years that I started really to explore my own diversity, right? The fact that I was a woman, what did it mean? The fact that I was a Muslim, what did it mean, right? How does it translate? How I can go, in more depth in all those roles that I have. And then by doing this exercise, you also get some self-confidence. And when the environment you're working in, right, is enabling you, then it's really magic happens. You feel empowered. You're not shy anymore. I'm going to give you a few examples, like Ramadan. I used to be like not concerned or not, but I was shy. When Ramadan was coming, you were not obviously eating, you were not eating, but people were eating in front of you. So what would you do? I was shy to just say to people, please respect and don't eat in front of me. Right. So I was letting them do, and it was hurting. Right. And it was at times it was even very difficult. Well, come today, if someone eats in front of me, of course, I will tell them with a lot of respect. I will seek to educate them so that they can be respectful. Now, this is their choice if they want or not, but at least I will feel confident to just say that this is not appropriate. Okay. And that comes as a game changing, right, inclusion, because I could see like a shift in how I was responding because I was given the right to talk, right? I was given a safe space to share about what was important for me, what was bothering me, of course, always respecting the others. Yeah. So there are like many things like Eid. We celebrated last week Eid. Okay. It's probably over the last 5 years as well that I was consistently taking Eid days, even if it was in the middle of the week. Before that, I was scared to death that this will compromise my career, that people will not understand how I give up in the middle of the week, right? In a non-holiday period, right? But yeah, for the last 5 years, I've taken them and I'm more vocal about them. So what inclusion means for me is that it gives me the right to be transparent, to be vocal, and it gives me this empowerment to do that, right? And to be my full self at work. And of course, companies are smart. Those companies that are enabling that understand that we drive loyalty, right? We drive better results, because I would fight for a company that trusts me, empowers me, respects me for what I am. So ultimately, it's a virtuous circle. Yeah. So this is why for me this is really game changing.
Thank you very much, Imran. What's your thoughts on this from your perspective?
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up on some of the threads there. I think the diversity, I think we're all agreed, is not an end in itself. You have not, organizations don't kind of go, well, hey, we've got diversity and therefore we're done, right? Maybe a few years ago, that was where they were, but they get that they have to tap into that diversity the way Jamila was describing. And it's a journey, it's a long journey, and there are many successes, but there are also a lot of blind spots, right? And a lot of mistakes that organizations make. I think, our duty, those of us who are a few years further in their careers or older, have a duty to educate, right? Whether it's about, Ramadan, whether it's about the importance of Eid, whether it's about the importance of, Salah, but also all kinds of aspects of, our lives. Because we cannot always assume. I would love to assume that everybody is reading this stuff themselves and coming to their own understanding of what it means to be inclusive, but that's not the case, right? So we have to have the courage to explain, right? What we need to be our best selves, right? And to have the courage to do that the way Jamila described as well. And I think these things are, slowly happening, but I still often will, look at a room if I'm chairing a meeting or if I'm in a meeting, and I'm always thinking to myself, am I bringing everyone's voice in? Have I asked everyone to speak? There's no point in me having diversity in a room if I'm not tapping into it. Because some voices, you have introverts, you have extroverts, right? You have all different styles. You have the diversity. Am I tapping into that diversity? Yeah. Do they feel empowered to speak? Also, again, in my business, and I know it's the same for P&G and others, empowered to make mistakes, empowered to be creative, because you're not always going to get it right straight away. And if you don't create the right culture and a safe environment, then okay, you have diversity, but you don't have inclusiveness. People can't dance, right? They can't be free. They can't give the solution. So I think this is really important. And there are also, there's a lot of behavioral stuff. There's also structural stuff, right? There is also, in my own organization, look, I'll be very transparent about this. When I made 15 years at this organization, I was really disappointed because they made a kind of a gift to me. And it was a very nice, very expensive gift. But part of the gift was a bottle of champagne. Right now, this was only 5 years ago. And alhamdulillah, I don't.
Expensive? Was that the expensive part?
Sorry, Ibrahim?
I said, was that the element that pumped up the price?
Well, it was, yeah, exactly. And I kind of said to myself, look, I've been working for this office for 15 years, and yes, people come and go from the HR function and so on. And so why do we have processes? Why do we have thinking that doesn't allow to think, does this individual even, will they appreciate a bottle of champagne? Do they, why would we do that? And now, thankfully, we've changed those processes and we actually think, right? The HR people actually say, what would be appropriate for this individual? I remember they also gave a present, a voucher to a steak restaurant to a vegetarian, yeah, or in fact, a vegan, right? And that person is a vegan, and everybody who worked with that person knew they were a vegan, right? But someone in HR decided to give them a voucher for a meal with their family as a prize. I don't remember what it was for, to a steak restaurant, right? Now, that individual is thinking, yeah, fine, okay, I can pass the voucher on. But does that make you feel included? Does it make you feel like you belong? Is this a place you're going to spend 10 hours a day? Like I said right at the beginning, we spend a lot of time in our work, right? And if work is not mirroring back who we are, then that's a big issue. Another quick example: headhunters, recruitment firms. Historically, I would never put pressure on them. I would just assume that they are bringing me the best talent, right? Now that talent was always the same, looked always the same. Yeah, males from Cambridge, Oxford, whatever. Yeah, white. Yeah. Now I'm saying to them, hey, this is not good enough. You need to bring me female CVs. You need to bring me black, minority, ethnic CVs. Guess what? They come. It's much harder for the headhunter. They have to work harder. But guess what? Now they work hard. They bring me the CVs. Right, but it's about trying. It's about trying hard. And my final point is, it's also about others. Right now, I'm not black, but we all know, and it's like the 1-year anniversary of the death or the murder, I should say, of George Floyd. I think Monday is the anniversary. 1 year ago, I looked at the London office and I asked myself, where is the diversity of Black colleagues? Where is the diversity? Why don't we hire more? Now we've hired more Black colleagues, but I continue to be close to this topic. I continue to be a strong ally to that particular group, because we have to ask ourselves, not just from within our community and any of those intersections that we fit into, but to say, how are we helping others? How are we being of service to others? Whichever position that we're in. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes just by being male, we are in the majority and we are in a position of power. Yeah. Or if I'm in the Middle East or so on. So we have to always look around us and say, how can we equally support other communities, other groups as well, and be strong allies to those groups as well. Yeah. So that's just my final point.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And like Imran proposed or suggested some good practices and experiences he had in bringing forward the diversity and inclusion topic, maybe Jamila, you can share with us some recommendations as well, how we can move this topic forward or embrace it a bit more.
Yeah, well, I think the one, if I was to leave with one big suggestion, is you also have a role to play yourself in educating others. That is important. I think I was probably too naive, or I was probably, my level of expectation was then wrong, because I was hoping that they will understand me and will like adapt to me. Well, yes, but they also need help, right? So I think educating people around you is absolutely key, okay? So ultimately, if I go back, I would say first, know about yourself, accept who you are, right? And then, of course, in an environment where you feel safe, because the reality is not every company is getting it. Not every company is working hard on creating these I would say, safe environment, right? So if you feel you're in a safe environment, then dare to show, dare to educate people around you, right? So that not only you will benefit from it, because as Imran said, we're spending like so many hours per day in the office or with colleagues, that it is not an option not to hide ourselves, right? So yeah, dare to show, dare to educate people around you, but start by knowing yourself.
Excellent, thank you very much. I opened the floor to the participants. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. But meanwhile, I will share this small meme, let's say. So we have this, Imran, this is the surprise for you. Who led the digital transformation in your company? The CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19? As you see now, we are working much more remotely from home and so on. But if we were to apply this meme or joke to diversity and inclusion, do you think, let's say, COVID-19 being a big disruptor that pushed the digital people embracing working from home culture, or do you think it's going to go, continuously improving and gradually being embraced, or do you believe has to be a disruptor?
So, Ibrahim, is that a disruptor to more diversity in the workplace?
Yes, like a sudden effect, and where on the contrast being a continuous improvement, and so on.
Well, actually, in terms of disruption, I think certainly I can speak for my organization. The big disruptor was the events of last year. Actually, George Floyd. That was a big step change, and until that point, we had a very strong diversity campaign in the US, exclusively in the US, very little elsewhere, very little. We actually had quite a bit about gender diversity. We had quite a lot about sexuality in terms of Proud. We had a big Proud campaign, but very little in terms of minority ethnic groups, ethnic minority. When George Floyd happened last year, that was the first time that we made a massive step change and huge acceleration. We had lots of commitments for gender diversity, like how many leaders we want, how many partners we want, and so on. Nothing for minority ethnic groups. And that was the first time we created targets for that. We created targets for how much pro bono work we will do with Black charities. We had targets for how many days we will spend working with minority groups and so on and so forth. It was a huge change. And actually, in all our history as a firm, I think we only had white male CEOs, white male CEOs, until 2 years ago, when we had a Chinese American CEO now, right? Now, yesterday, he wrote to us about the Uyghur Muslims in China. And he said that from his own country of China, he's so embarrassed about the situation there. I could not believe it. Now, I like to think we made a lot of progress, but to get an email like that from him yesterday, I was shocked, absolutely shocked. He covered some other themes as well, because it was partly to do with the anniversary of George Floyd's murder. But he covered the Palestine situation, he covered the Uyghur situation, he also covered our commitments towards Black diversity. And I fell off my chair. I honestly, I thought, yes, we are moving, but never at this pace that we have in the last year. So I think for me, that was a huge disruptor. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jamila, what's your thoughts on the meme?
Yes, well, very similar, obviously. Although I would say our what we call the ENI, equality and inclusion strategies, have been very much enforced before George, but of course this was an accelerator. And just to give you an example, back in 2015, we had started with a lot more equality and inclusion program, like the supply diversity program, so which I was actually responsible for outside the US. So yes, it was, but definitely was an accelerator, equivalent to COVID-19. Now, there are also other elements that has actually sort of pushed us to think beyond the George Floyd event, that pushed us to really think, well, now this is time. Now this is time for disruption. You know, there is this Edelman Trust Barometer study that comes every year, and it basically tells you, well, like, what are the organizations that are the most trusted, okay? And you will see on that report that it's no longer the governments, it's no longer the NGOs, it's no longer the institutions, it's actually the private sector, the companies. So this basically puts quite a lot of pressure on companies, right? Because they are now not targeted, but they are being asked to take a stand on all the societal issues, right? So they have a role to play. They cannot hide anymore. So that is something really that is super powerful. And think of the next generations, like the new generation, the Gen Z, the millennials. They're taking this for granted, right? They're taking equality for granted. They will not work in a company that does not support equality and that does not enforce equality. So there is this shift. And then ultimately, we're also seeing that from investors, right? You're right. When you stare at it, we're all about profit, because at the end of the day, if a company doesn't make profit, then it's dead. And then it's problems for everyone. But yeah, it's profit, it's people, it's planet, right? But large investors are now saying, right, asking if you think of BlackRock and equivalent, they want companies with purpose. They want companies who are good corporate citizens, who are demonstrating reinvestment in the communities that they serve. Okay, so and this, it's also getting accelerated over the last, I would say, 2 years. So there is a combination of different events, different, let's say, wake-up calls that are happening, that are creating these this fuel for diversity. Now, it is important that it does not stay as a trend, and this is why it is important that intentionality, results, performance are managed, are tracked, and there is this continuous push from civil society, from corporations, from everyone to make this happen.
Thank you very much, Jamila. And with this, we will conclude this panel about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Once again, thank you very much, Imran and Jamila, for giving us your time. Really appreciate it, and we hope to collaborate more and support each other more in the future.